Assalamualaikum, hello everyone, good day. The Honorable Mutmainah M.Pd as the lecturer of Second Language Acquisition. We are from Group 3 and today we are going to discuss about interlanguage and the natural route of development. But before that, allow us to introduce ourselves. My name is Nurul maskana and my partners are Nazhif Alfaqih Ahmad, Novita Anggreini, Putri Ayu Habso, Oki Dayansyah, and Tiwi Nopiani. So, what are you waiting for? Just keep on watching. Well, my friends, I will explain the first material. It is about the introduction, mentalist theory of first language acquisition, and the interlanguage. But before we start, I want you to open up your book and turn to page 42 to get you more comprehend about the material that we are going to discuss. Open up your book, please. Well, I will introduce this chapter to you. So, the starting point for the chapter will also be L1 acquisition, where SLA was concerned the key concept in the revised thinking of the process learning was that of interlanguage. Then, interlanguage was the theoretical construct which underlay the attempt of SLA researchers to identify the stages of development through which L2 learners pass on their way to L2 proficiency. This research indicated that there were strong similarities in the development route followed by different L2 learners. Now, we come to the goal of this chapter. The goal of this chapter is to examine the claims that the second language or L2 learners acquire a knowledge of L2 in a fixed order as a result of a predisposition to process a language data in highly specific ways. In stark contrast to behaviorist accounts of SLA, this emphasizes the importance of environmental factors and first language or L1 interference. Now, let's move to the mentalist account of first language acquisition. Chomsky's 1959 attack on Skinner's theory of language learning led to a reassertion of mentalist views of first language acquisition or FLA in place of the empiricist approach of the behaviorists. Chomsky stressed the active contribution of the child and minimized the importance of imitation and reinforcement. He claimed that the child's knowledge of his mother tongue was derived from a universal grammar which specified the essential form that any natural language could take. So let me speak in my first language. Jadi si Chomsky ini tadi menyatakan bahwa kemampuan atau pengetahuan bahasa pertama atau bahasa ibu dari anak itu didapatkan atau diturunkan dari tata bahasa yang universal. For example, a child was raised up in Indonesia so that, jadi kalau anak itu dibesarkan di Indonesia, anak itu bisa berbahasa Indonesia dengan susunan bahasa yang diturunkan. Nah, seperti itu. Jadi automatically he derived it from the universal grammar which specified the essential form that any natural language could take. Seperti itu. Begitu juga dengan anak yang dibesarkan di negara lain. Mereka mendapatkan kemampuan bahasa pertama itu dari tata bahasa yang universal. Well, to sum up this part of mentalist theory of first language acquisition, here are the mentalist views of first language acquisition. First, language is a human-specific faculty. Second, language exists as an independent faculty in the human mind. Third, the primary determinant of L1 acquisition is the child's acquisition device, which is genetically endowed and provides the child with a set principle about grammar. Fourth, the acquisition device atrophies with age. And then the last one, the process of acquisition consists of hypothesis testing, by which means the grammar of the learner's mother tongue is related to the principle of the universal grammar, like Chomsky said before. Now, we come to the term of interlanguage. The term interlanguage was first used by Schillinger in 1972. Schillinger's paper was provided the theoretical framework for interpreting SLA as a mentalistic process and for the empirical investigation of language learner language. And then there are 5 principal processes operated in interlanguage. First, language transfer. Second, overgeneralization of target language rules. And then third, transfer of training. Fourth, strategies of L2 learning. And then the last one is strategies of L2 communication. According to Schillinger 1972, there are 3 principal features of interlanguage. They are: language learner language is permeable, language learner language is dynamic, and language learner language is systematic. These features will be talked deeply by the next presenter. Stay tuned.
Well, my name is Tiwi Nopiani and I will continue explain about 3 principal features of interlanguage. The first one is language learner is permeable. The second one is language learner is dynamic, and the third one, language learner is systematic. Well, the first one is language learner is permeable. It means that the rule of constitution of the learner's knowledge at any one stage are not fixed, but open to amendment. And the second one is language learner is dynamic. L2 learners interlanguage constantly changing. It doesn't jump from one stage to the next stage, but slowly revises the interim systems to accommodate new hypotheses about language systems target, thus making use of the wrong grammar. And this takes place by introduction of a new rule, first in one context and then in another. And the third one is language learner is systematic. Despite the variability between languages, it doesn't choose haphazard from the interlanguage rule shop, but predictable. It bases the performance plans on an existing system of rules, just as native speakers base their plans on internalized knowledge of the L1 system. Based on the performance evaluation of L2 in terms of grammar, the target language is not satisfactory, because the students behave grammatically in the sense that he draws systematically the rules between languages. Hence, the very term error is questionable. Okay, I think enough from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nazhif Ahmad. I will continue explaining the material that I have explained before. Error analysis. Sridhar, 1981, points out that error analysis has a long tradition. Before the early 1980s, however, error analysis consisted of little more than impressionistic collections of common errors and their linguistic classifications. Error analysis provides 2 kinds of information about inner language. The first, it concerns the linguistic type of errors produced by L2 learners, and second one is it concerns the psycholinguist type of errors produced by L2 learners. The goals of traditional error analysis were pedagogic. Errors provide information which could be used to sequence items for teaching or to devise remedial lessons. George 1972 says that errors derived from the learner's need to exploit the redundancy of language by omitting elements that are non-essential for the communication of meaning. Prevention and identification errors. In accordance with behaviorist learning theory, the prevention of errors, the goal of contrastive analysis, was more important than the identification of errors. The procedure for error analysis by Coder 1974. There are 5 procedures for error analysis by Coder. The first is a corpus of language is selected. This involves deciding on the size of the sample, the medium to be sampled, and the homogeneity of the sample. The second one is the errors in the corpus are identified. Coder 1971 points out the need to distinguish lapses. That is, deviant sentences that are the result of processing limitations rather than lack of competence. The third one is the errors are classified. This involves assigning a grammatical description to each error. And the fourth one is the errors are explained. In this stage of the procedure, an attempt is made to identify the psycholinguistic cause of the errors. For example, an attempt could be made to establish which of the 5 processes described by Slinker 1972, as discussed earlier in this chapter, is responsible for each error. And the last one is the errors are evaluated. This stage involves assessing the seriousness of each error in order to take principled teaching decisions. Error evaluation is necessary only if the purpose of the error analysis is pedagogic. It is redundant if the error analysis is carried out in order to research SLA. As a result of interlanguage theory of the evidence accumulated from error analysis, errors were no longer seen as unwanted forms, as George 1972 said, but as evidence of the learner's active contribution to SLA. This contribution appeared to be broadly the same irrespective of differences in learners' backgrounds, suggesting that the human faculty for language may structure and define the learning task in such a way that SLA, like L1 acquisition, was universal in nature. However, the conclusive evidence proved that there was a natural road of development was not forthcoming from error analysis, although, as the next section will show, with a number of methodological developments, this cross-sectional analysis of language could provide such evidence. Empirical evidence for the interlanguage hypothesis. In particular, empirical research was required to decide on the nature of the interlanguage continuum. There are 2 views of recreation continuum. The first is called as the former view. In the former view, the learner is seen as gradually replacing features of this mother tongue as he acquires features of the target language. And the second view is called as latter view. In the latter view, the learner is seen as slowly creating the rule system of the target language in a manner very similar to child's acquisition of his first language. Cross-sectional research was carried out to investigate the order of acquisition of a range of grammatical functors in the speech of L2 learners. They were motivated by the hypothesis that there was an invariant order in SLA, which was the result of universal processing strategies similar to those observed in L1 acquisition. The vast majority of errors produced by child L2 learners, according to two Carly studies, Julie and Burt, 1973 and 1974b, they were developmental, that is not subject to L1 interference, and that the acquisition orders of child learners remained the same, irrespective of their L1s or of the methods used to score the accuracy of use of the morphemes.
I would like to continue Nazhif's explanation. My name is Putri Ayu Habso. The first question is talk about what is longitudinal studies. Longitudinal studies is describe the gradual growth of the competence in relationship the strategy used by learner at a different point of development. Every growth of competence is always related to student strategies at various points of development. And the main advantage of SLA longitudinal studies is provide data from multiple points in the time and therefore allow a reliable SLA profile of each learner to be built. But the disadvantage, of course, lies in the difficulty of making generalizations based on profile of one or two studies. And the second explanation, let's talk about the negotiation. The description is based on several negative development. The development negation studies. First is Milan, 1974, and Ravam, 1968, and Zadden et al. 1975, and Adam, 1978, and Wadam, 1976 and 1980, and Butterworth and Elad had at 1978. This is a fractional overview of various SLA negation studies is according to Schumann 1979. The type of acquisition is naturalistic and makes involving instruction and natural exposure to the target language. The fractional overview of various SLA negation studies according to Schumann 1979 is first the learner combined the use of negation by adopting their L1 form. For example, no, very good, no, you playing here. And the second is after going through several development, they know the sum of do plus not. For example, Mariana not coming today. I know can swim. I know can swim. I don't know see nothing move. And the third is next step the negative attachment to modal verb. It's going better, although still the simple form. For example, I can play this one. I want to go. And the fourth the final stage of negation, the target language rule in Rikid, it become completely correct. They begin to use the variety of tenses. For example, he doesn't know anything. I didn't say it, and she didn't believe me. The part this second stage, which for from studies can take more than 2 verbs. The stage are not clear. They overreact. So development doesn't consist of static leaps, but the gradual rearrangement of the initial rules to support later some of difference among learners. So this stage accept some students sometimes overlap depending on the difference between students. And the third explanation from me is talk about interrogation. Some experts who studied for the description of interrogation are Riven 1974 and Kazdan et al. 1975 and Julius and Weber 1917 Sick and Mode 1978 and Sapira 1978 and Adams 1978 and Butterworth and Hart 1978 and the productive question. The first productive are intonation question, which declarative word order but spoken with raising intonation. For example, I am coloring. Sir plays football today. I writing on this book. What is? And the second is development become in a appearance of productive WH questions, but the auxiliary verb is often omitted. For example, what you are doing, what top meant, and what the time. And the third improvement in variation occur in yes or no question and WH question. In variation with tend to occur before in variation with do. For example, are you nurse? Where is the girl? Do you work on the television? What she is doing here? At the last development, they have a subject a verb in variation, as in ordinarily WH question. I don't know, where do you live? The development of interrogation rules was gradual, involving overlapping stage and the substitution of slow transition form. There are also different that can be attributed to the language background of the learners. Okay, I think enough my explanation. The next explanation will be explained by Oki Dayansyah.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Oki Dayansyah. I would like to explain about relative clauses. What is relative clauses? Well, relative clauses is used to modify the object of a sentence where acquired first. For example, and she said all the bad things that he do. Joshua's a boy who is silly. Here you can see the relative clauses is who. who is relative pronouns and who talking to silly is relative clauses. Later, relative clauses modifying the subject of a sentence is a pair like, but the one you gonna go, it don't have eyes. The boy who doesn't have anybody to like, they take care of the dog. And the relative clause is who. Okay, next, a composite longitudinal picture. In addition to the study of how specific grammatical subsistence evolve, there have been attempts to point a composite picture of the interlanguage continuum based on longitudinal research. Schumann, 1978, and Anderson, 1981, have suggested that the developmental continuum closely resembles that of the pagination continuum. Ellis, 1984, attempted to summarize the developmental progressions which has been observed in longitudinal studies. He identifies four broad stages of development. The first stage is characterized by a standard word order, irrespective of whether or not this is the word order of the target in language structure. Second stage is development. The learner expands his proposition to include all or most of the continuum required and also begin to vary the word order of utterance in accordance with the word order pattern of the target language. Third stage is grammatical morphemes begin to be used systematically and meaningfully. The fourth stage consists of the acquisition of complex sentence structure such as M.Pd, WH clauses, and relative clauses modifying the subject of a sentence. Next is summary. The longitudinal research has provided strong evidence in favor of a natural developmental road in SLA. There is evidence to show considerable similarity in the way that negation and interrogatives develop in learners with different L1s, including those that belong to different types of language. There is some evidence to show that advanced grammatical structure, such as relative clauses, may also follow a universal courses. An attempt to describe the entire course of development in SLA as a series of overlapping.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Novita Anggreini. I will continue the explanation. I will explain the first topic is about interpreting the empirical evidence. It is easy to overstate the case for a natural road of development. The sequence is not universal in the sense that all learners acquire every item in exactly the same order. There are differences which can be attributed to factors such as the L1. Also, there can be broad difference in the approach that learners adopt. According to Hatch, 1974, he distinguishes data gatherers and rule formers. The first type of learner is not bothered very much with formal accuracy and concentrates instead on fluency. One way is to make a distinction between the sequence of development and the order of development. This is universal. The product of the process of creative construction. All learners pass through the four stages, and this will reflect it in a basic sequence for such transitional structures as negatives and interrogatives. Thus, for instance, external negation will precede internal negations, and intonation or an intonation question will precede inverted questions. However, learners will still vary in when and if specific grammatical features appear in their interlanguage. And then the second topic is about the L2, same like L1 hypothesis. The L2, same like L1 acquisition hypothesis, has not been proven in its strong form, although similar processes appear to operate in both types of acquisition. In SLA, both the L1 and also maturational factors play a part. According to Kasdan, 1972 summary of the order of development for interrogatives in L1 acquisition is strikingly similar to that in SLA. Here the main stages Kasdan identifies. The first is one word utterance used as questions. The second is intonation questions appear on a regular basis, and there are some WH questions learned as ready make chunks. And then the third is intonation questions become more complicated and productive WH questions without inversion occurs. And then the fourth is inversion involving auxiliary occur in yes or no question but not in WH question. The fifth is inversion occurs in WH question. And then the sixth is embedded WH question developed. And then according to Sloban, 1973, he suggested that the way children process language in L1 acquisition can be explained in terms of series of operating principles, such as the first is pay attention to the ends of words. The second is the phonological of words can be systematically modified. The third is pay attention to the order of words and morphemes. The fourth is avoid interruption and rearrangement of linguistic units. The fifth is underlying semantics should be marked overtly and clearly. The sixth is avoid exceptions. The seventh is the use of grammatical markers should make semantic sense. The third topic is about some outstanding issues. A number of methodological and theoretical difficulties of the interlanguage construct and claims for a natural sequence of development. The fourth topic is about methodological problems, error analysis, and etc. The first is error analysis. The procedure for error analysis was elaborated according by Gordon 1974 as comprising 5 stages. The first is selection of a corpus of language. The second is identification of errors in the corpus. The third is classification of the errors identified. The fourth is explanation of the psycholinguistic causes of the errors. The last is evaluation, error gravity ranking of the errors. And then the second problem is morpheme studies. And then the third problem is longitudinal studies. And then the fourth is The focus on grammar. The major theories issues concern: the first is the starting point of the interlanguage continuum. The second is the extent to which an adequate explanation of SLA requires a consideration of factors external to the learner as well as internal factors. And then the last is the problems posed for interlanguage theory and the natural sequence by variability inherent in language learner language. And then the fifth problem is origins of interlanguage. According to Corder, a 1981 considers two possibilities of starting points. The first point is the learner starts from scratch in the same way as an infant acquiring his mother tongue. The second is the learner starts from some basic simple grammar. According to Corder 1981, page 150, he suggests that language learners regress to an earlier stage in their own linguistic development before starting the process of elaboration. According to Alice 1982, she argued that there is no need to posit that the learner remembers early acquisition in stages. The fifth problem is about neglect of external factors. Mentalist accounts of language acquisition originate in the rejection of behaviorist explanations of how language was learned. And then the last problem is about the problem of variability. One of the principles of interlanguage theory is that language learner language systematic. Interlanguage theory doesn't cope easily with learner variability. It struggles to explain why or when variability takes place. The natural road of development also ignores another type of variability, that which varies from individual differences. I think that's all from my explanation. Thank you for attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.